Friends Service Committee, the FSC. I'm meeting with you tonight from the unceded and unsurrendered territories of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, also known as Ottawa. Tonight, CFSC, together with Peace Brigades International, have brought together Kelsey Gallagher from Project Plowshares, Brent Patterson from PBI, and Mel Burns, Peace Coordinator from CFSC, to discuss and put into context the moment we are living through and offer ideas for action in the face of despair. What we would really like to do is discuss and delve deeper into how we can bear intentional witness to this moment where military spending is at an all-time high and it's projected to further increase. And this comes simultaneously with cuts to the public service that will greatly negatively impact the marginalized and vulnerable amongst us, where commitments made to international laws, treaties, and human rights seem to be considered as afterthoughts to economic interest and supposed security, where violence through the accumulation of weapons and weapons manufacturing is being seen as the solution to this insecurity. It's been said by certain leaders that we will achieve peace through strength. And this is very indicative of the might makes right ideology. But as Quakers, CFSC is quite against this idea. We would much rather stand by the statement, strength through peace, because an active and positive peace is what we believe will actually get us through this difficult time. So I'd like to just outline a little bit. First, I'll invite Kelsey Gallagher to speak. And he is from Project Plowshares, and he is on their arms trade file. And he'll speak a little to the context of the moment, to Canada's obligations to the Arms Trade Treaty, and also the No More Loopholes Bill, which is currently through Parliament. He'll be followed by Brent Patterson, who will discuss a little bit of previous CANSEC organizing. And CANSEC is the largest arms fair in North America, and it takes place here in Ottawa. And he'll talk about previous organizing that's taken place for that, and also his recent experience with Quakers at the DSEI protest in London. And lastly, Mel Burns will speak a little to the different ways protests take place and our plans for CANSEC this year. So I would like to invite Kelsey to speak now. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sandra, and thanks everyone for joining. And of course, thanks so much for the opportunity to chat with you tonight. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. We should see a mostly disassembled F-35. Okay. So thanks so much. Good to be here. As noted, I already see some friendly faces on the call, but my name is Kelsey Gallagher, and I'm a senior researcher with Project Plowshares on our conventional arms trade file. For those of you that don't know Plowshares, Plowshares is Canada's oldest peace research organization, and we do research and advocacy on issues related to peace, security, and disarmament. I'm going to jump right into it because the moment is large and there's a lot going on right now. So let's jump right to it. So as noted off the top, I'm going to speak a little bit today about Bill C-223, 233 rather, which is also known as the No More Loopholes Act. So that would include covering the kind of structural relationship between the Canadian and American military industrial bases, as well as how Canada is out of step with international law and its current position vis-a-vis the U.S. defense trade. So as it stands today, and as it has stood for essentially ever since this stat has been on the record, the U.S. remains the largest consumer of Canadian military goods in most typical years. There's been some years, for instance, following the onset of the well-known Saudi arms deal, where Saudi Arabia was the largest consumer of Canadian military goods, likely. But that all being said, in most given years, we can securely say that the U.S. is the largest consumer of Canadian military goods. So when we say, Canadian arms sales to the US or Canadian arms sales to any other place. We're not really talking about the government of Canada selling, state-produced weaponry to the US government. What we're talking about is Canadian manufacturers that are seeking to export weapon systems to a foreign country. Most of these or some of them are large multinationals, which you might know, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, etc., that have campuses in Canada, as well as smaller producers of parts and components. Whenever a manufacturer is seeking to export a weapon system to a foreign country, that manufacturer has to seek what's called an export permit from the Export Controls Division in Global Affairs Canada to essentially ensure that that weapon system will not be used in serious violations of international humanitarian law or international human rights law alongside other potential abuses. The issue being discussed, I'm discussing now, is the fact that the vast majority of Canada's arms transfers to the United States do not require any oversight from Canadian officials and really never have. And this goes back to something called the Defense Production Sharing Arrangement or Agreement, rather, or DPSA, that was established in the mid-1950s. This is not only problematic because of the sort of circus that we see happening in the States right now, but at the same time, most of Canada's arms exports are destined to the United States. So whereas Canada actually does have quite a mature and well-functioning arms control system, because we do not regulate most of our arms exports to the United States, that means that most of Canada's total arms exports are not subject to any sort of human rights risk assessment or any measures of transparency. Going on to the third point, not all of these weapon systems stay within the United States. When Canada exports a controlled good, whether or not it's a full light armored vehicle or a component in, let's say, an F-35, just because we're transferring it to the US government doesn't mean it's going to stay there. I'm going to assume that most people on this call realize that the US government is far and away the largest arms dealer in the world. And just due to that fact, some of what Canada exports to the United States does not stay in the United States, but is there afterwards actually exported onto third users, end users, some of them with pretty poor human rights records, which is certainly something to be concerned about. Finally, on this point, Canada's current standard or lack thereof for regulating arms exports to the United States violates international law. So Canada has been a states party to the UN Arms Trade Treaty since September 2019, and the ATT has legally binding obligations at the international level for states parties that have acceded to the treaty. So Canada failing to authorize all of its arms exports on a case-by-case basis actually violates multiple aspects of the ATT. So right off the top, we can see Article 5.1 requires states parties to authorize arms transfers in a universal manner. But I would actually argue the more critical aspects of the ATT that this relationship violates is Article 6 and Article 7. Those two operative articles saying that A, if a country is conducting genocide, you can't ship weapons to that country. B, if there's a substantial risk that a given weapon system could be used to kill a civilian, you can't authorize that arms export. Of course, because there's no oversight over the Canada-US arms trade, none of these articles, these very critical operative articles of the ATT, are being observed by Canadian officials, meaning that Canada is out of step with international law. I know I'm going very fast right now, but as always, there's so much to get to it. I do not want to go over time. So, looking at the United States, it's bad on its face that Canada is knowingly out of step with international law, right? We saw Mr. Carney gave a very impressive speech at Davos recently saying, the international system doesn't work and the international rules-based order is being kind of disregarded. So on its face, it's not only hypocritical, but it's also poor practice for Canada to not observe its legal obligations at the international stage as it relates to the Arms Trade Treaty. However, there are material ramifications for the government of Canada to not control its arms transfers to the United States and in some critical ways through the United States. So there's a couple good examples that could be raised to really amplify this. One that I'll speak to two. One, and this got a lot of coverage, and Plowshares did a bunch of work on this as well. Um, Canada in each F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which would be this, most of an F-35 seen here. According to statements made by then Foreign Minister, I think she was actually on the defense file, Anita Anand at the time. Um, each F-35 contains about $3 million. I think it's $3.2 million worth of Canadian components, right? So coast to coast to coast, they say, I think it's 110 different suppliers in Canada that have produced components for the F-35 Joint Strike Fighter, which is of course made in Fort Worth by Lockheed Martin. Aside from everything we can say about Canada now procuring the aircraft, uh, these aircraft have been a critical way in which Israel has conducted the ongoing bombardment of Gaza, right? So Israel has about 45 F-35s in its stockpile of weapon systems. All of these essentially gifted to the U.S. as a means of foreign military aid by the United States. And where Canada comes into this is again, there's over $3 million worth of components in each F-35. Canada took, I would say, the principled step. It didn't go far enough, but the principled step in suspending new authorizations of arms export permits to Israel in January 2024, a few months after the October 7 attacks and the onset of the bombardment in Gaza. So at this point, we have Canada that is saying we're not going to authorize new arms export permits for transfers of weapon systems to Israel because there's an overriding risk that these could be used to kill civilians. And obviously, there's documented evidence of that. However, due to the loopholes endemic in Canada's control system, these transfers of F-35 components to the United States and thereafterwards on to Israel are totally unfettered by any oversight measures by the government of Canada. There's zero transparency afforded to these transfers, and I think most importantly, there's zero human rights guardrails that have been put in place by Global Affairs Canada. And it should be noted the F-35 is actually one of only few types of aircraft that Israel has used in its bombardment of Gaza. And human rights monitors, as well as UN officials, have directly linked the use of explosive weapons by the IDF in Gaza as being the primary driver of civilian harm events and the destruction of critical infrastructure, primarily being airstrikes. So this is just an example where we can show if there were credible human rights guardrails in place and oversight on the part of the government of Canada, then we wouldn't see these components transferred through the United States onto a government that credibly is facing accusations of war crimes. The second example that I will point to, this was from a report, it should be on your screen here. This was a report that Plowshares released in October of 2025, where we found that Optronics, Canadian surveillance and targeting sensors produced by a company called L3Harris-Westcam outside of Hamilton, Ontario, were used in airstrike operations that targeted alleged narco-terrorists by the U.S. government in the Caribbean. These operations were deemed to be were dubbed extrajudicial killings by Human Rights Watch as well as UN officials. And as per our research, Canadian components were utilized again in these operations. This was from a report called Targeted from Above, and I would suggest you go take a look. So finally, what is being done now? We understand the problem now, hopefully. So what is happening now? I should note that this loophole loopholes have been in place for much before Canada acceded to the Arms Trade Treaty. This is something that Plowshares has been talking about for decades. And that is because these loopholes are really baked into Canada's arms control regime. And that again is because of the structural nature of this kind of the Canadian and US defense industrial base, which is sometimes just referred to as the North American Defense Industrial Base. So Bill C-233, which is also known as the No More Loopholes Act, is a private member's bill that was introduced by a member of parliament from Vancouver East. And this act actually seeks to close these loopholes. It seeks to treat all arms transfers coming out of Canada with the same regulatory rigor as required under international law. And when we say Canada is breaking international law here, we mean it, right? The Arms Trade Treaty is an international legal instrument to which Canada acceded. So the two things that this bill seeks to do, and I would also suggest going and reading the bill. I mean, it's available online. It's been written about a lot. It seeks to remove the exemption that would provide yes, remove the exemption. So therefore, all Canadian arms transfers outgoing, wherever they're destined, would be subject to an export permit. Of course, this loophole only applies to the United States. So all the bill is again attempting to do is to bring all Canadian arms transfers to the same regulatory threshold. The second thing that it attempts to do is to end general export permits in the few cases where Canada's arms transfers to the United States are subject to export permits, and these are really few cases. They are transferred with a general export permit. So the bill would actually dissolve that permit, meaning everything is held to the exact same standard. And then finally, at the end of the day, this would bring Canada in step with its international legal obligations. As much as you hear us complain about Canada being out of step with international law, for us, the real concern is that Canadian weapons are being used in conflict zones, again, that are replete with credible allegations of war crimes. Whether or not these loopholes are breaking this law or that law, these loopholes are making the situation on the ground the worse for civilians in places from the Caribbean to Gaza. And I really think that should be the thing taken home. I will stop it there. I'm more than happy to address any questions, and I look forward to hearing from Brent and Mel. Thanks so much.
Go ahead, Brent.
Okay, great, thanks. And maybe I will also just see if I can set up the hopefully you're seeing that. I'm going to trust that you are.
Yep, we got it.
Perfect, great. Yeah, thanks so much for the opportunity to spend some time with you this evening, and nice to see some familiar faces, and yeah, so thank you for organizing. Thank you for coming together for this chat. What I was hoping to talk about a bit was, there is the legislative arms embargo, and I suppose in a sense there's sort of also a people's arms embargo, which can be understood as the protests that happen around the world at various arms show. There is one called CANSEC that is in Ottawa every year, every May. It takes place. If you haven't heard of it before, it's this massive gathering. Some 15,000 people come to the EY Center, this convention center up by the airport in Ottawa. There's some 60 plus international delegations, countries from around the world that come to CANSEC, and about 300, more than 300 exhibitors, 300 corporations that are basically coming to market and sell weapons components, surveillance, various technologies to this large group of people who've come. And it's probably about 600 plus government officials, generals, that kind of group that is there, and a remarkable 96%, apparently, according to the organizers of the CANSEC Arms Show, 96% of the attendees have purchasing power. So it is a place where weapons components, technology, promoted, marketed, bought and sold. and and an important place for those of us who care about peace, who oppose the use of weapons, just oppose the use of weapons, but oppose the use of weapons to commit genocide, to violate human rights, to repress populations. It's an important place for us to be. So just going to share some photos with you, and the first few are from London, England. I didn't take this picture, but most of the photos I took when I was there in September to observe the DSEI or DSEI arms show there, and in particular the Quaker mobilization that takes place, and hoping that some of what they do might be inspiring you or inspiring us collectively in terms of what might be possible with the CANSEC arms show this spring. So this first photo is an action that the Quakers did the day prior to the DSEI arms show starting, where there was a walk to witness the death merchants in London. So where they're going to the offices of the various arms dealers in London, much as is in the case of Ottawa. There's corporate offices in the city as well. So there is a visibilization and a renunciation of the violence that they're doing. The second photo is that same day. It's the evening just before the DSEI arms show starts, and this is a photo of a vigil that was organized there that I attended, and that was incredibly powerful in many ways to see, and grounding and important, and coming together as a community to share some stories and thoughts in terms of why it's important to oppose the arms trade, the sale of arms, the export of arms, and all the harms that it does. And so this was a coming together before the next day. This is a photo I took the morning of the first day of the DSEI arms show. It's, I don't know, maybe 40 meters away from the main entrance into the Excel Center where the arms show is taking place. And as you can see, War Starts Here banner and a clear Quaker presence there. And maybe also you can see in this photo, it's as the thousands of people who are walking into the Excel Center were able to see that message and understand that there's people who are concerned about what they're doing. This next photo is along with the Quaker presence and the Quaker witness. There was also a broader mobilization of people from various social movements, a lot of young people who physically blocked the primary entrance to the Excel Center. And they did so just with their bodies, being there in mass and by holding these banners that blocked that main entrance. As you can maybe see, the police were there and basically encircled that blockade, that people's blockade, but that was in place for multiple hours that morning. And what that meant was that since the main entrance was blocked, that the arms dealers, the merchants, the people who were going into the Excel Center couldn't go through that main entrance, so they went around a side entrance. And another photo I took, but it was great to see how many Quakers were able to then move to a different part and be visible to the arms dealers and those exhibiting there, again, to see this alternate message, and some Quaker friends who managed to get a very good location right at the entrance to the Excel Center with various signs and banners and whatnot. And again, sharing this with the idea that perhaps these are the things that could be done in Ottawa. Lots of police, of course, there's a lot of police, but you'll see the banner stayed up on the fence and continued to be visible there. And as things wound down that day, just again, a short distance from the entrance to the Excel Center, there was an opportunity for Quakers to gather in reflection and in community, and again, I think to kind of strengthen their understanding and community in terms of why they were there and the importance of why they were there. And then remarkably, the next day, they continued their work by going to the Clarion Events, which is sort of the corporation that organizes the arms show, again, to petition them to drop DSEI and not to continue to organize those arms shows. Mel is going to talk about some of the things that are coming up, so I won't take too much more time, but I did want to just kind of transition to CANSEC a bit and say this is a photo from a previous year at Friend's House in Ottawa of a potluck that took place there. Again, that's here in Ottawa, just prior to the CANSEC Arms Show. Wanting to share that Quakers have for years have been a faithful presence outside of CANSEC, and important to continue to do that. And maybe to really just to say, if you live in Ottawa, May 27th is the first day of CANSEC, and hoping you can come out if you're within driving distance or traveling distance of Ottawa, to really think about sort of blocking off the day and seeing if you can come to the city for this. It really is a powerful, intense moment. And if you're far away across the country, maybe to think about ways in which you could engage. Otherwise, quickly, I think as my time wraps up, just wanting to show you kind of basically what it looks like, just if you haven't been there, to be able to see the number of people there and the placement, and essentially the effort is to disrupt or to stop people from entering the EY Center. And that's more or less what it looks like, and the kind of folks who are making their way past the protest to go inside. There's often lots of banners, and a bit dissimilar to what's in London, where it's mainly pedestrian traffic going into the Excel Center. Here in Ottawa with the EY Center, it's mostly cars, and so it's a protest around the parking lots and the entrances in that way. But these are the kinds of banners that are there, and the kinds of banners that you would see. There's also this kind of more street theater presence on the streets to try and visibilize again the effects and impacts of the weapons that are being sold. Another picture of people there, the kinds of response that one sees from the police to peaceful protest. And maybe just wanting to, this is the last slide, and just to wrap up, to say that in terms of these arms shows, that it is where war starts, in the sense of it's where the tools, the equipment, the technology, the components, all of that enable and facilitate the death and destruction and torture. And it's an important place to be as community, as activists, as Quakers, to oppose that form of violence and say that it's really appalling to have this kind of marketplace and seeing this kind of profiting from war and destruction. And maybe I'll leave it there. I think that's probably my time. But just as the last point, May 27th and 28th, CANSEC in Ottawa, organizing is already starting. I think this year is going to be bigger than ever. If you are someone who has picketed outside of an empty building or an MP's office when they're not there, this is really such a different thing because, as I say, 15,000 people, arms dealers, multiple weapons companies. It's a powerful place to be. It's a moving place to be. It's an important place to be. And if you can be there, I hope you can join us. And yeah, and happy to answer any questions later on as well. So thanks.
Thanks, Brent. I'll ask Mel. Go ahead.
Hi, friends. Thank you, Brent and Kelsey, for that wonderful information and for kind of setting the tone and the space for us all here of why this is important, what's going on, and what's been done historically. It is a focus of my work this year to do some more education and opportunities for folks to learn about civil resistance and nonviolence, and that plays in nicely with the work that's happening here and protest as a form of that. And one of the things that we talk about in this field, and one thing that many people have probably heard in results of teaching on nonviolence and civil resistance, is this 3.5% rule, where you need 3.5% of the population actively engaged in a single focused approach to civil resistance for there to be a meaningful shift. But that's all that it takes. But to get to that 3.5%, Erica Chenoweth, famous research in this area, talks about that you need all sorts of people to see themselves as part of a movement. You need people who are willing to do all sorts of actions. We don't just need people who are willing to throw themselves in the middle of the street. You need a wide range of the population to consider themselves as active participants. And so one of the things we wanted to talk about this evening was ways that you can participate, whether you are physically in Ottawa or whether you are in other parts of the countries, that there is a lot of ways to be creative in how we participate in these sorts of actions. And so I made a little very short graphic that I'm going to pop up on the screen to help us talk about the types and the roles that we can play during a protest. I'm just going to check that it's there. I want to start by saying this is not an exhaustive list. This is just a really top of the line ways that we participate in protests and the different types of people that we need. There sometimes can be a hesitation amongst the population when we see protests on TV. To think, oh, I could never do that. That's not me. I don't shout. I don't get really engaged. I'm not willing to stand in front of a car. And so that stops people from engaging. And what we want to do is to say there's lots of ways to do this. Nonviolence is creative. It demands creativity. And so it gets us an opportunity to be creative in the ways that we can engage with each other. And so all of these are valid ways. You can be someone who just stands and holds a sign. If that's what you're comfortable with and you make beautiful signs or don't make beautiful signs, but you can write a sign, then that's a way that you can participate. We need people who are willing to march and move and physically take up space. And if that's something that you like to do and that feels good for you, then that is a way that you can engage. We need people who are going to have chants or shouts, who are going to audibly fill up space, take up space, and distract and disrupt. That might not be you. You might not feel comfortable, but you also might be someone who really enjoys using their voice as a tool. We also need people who are observers and witnesses. This is really important. We need people, especially in the area of increased police presence at protests, to play the role of observers and witnesses. This is for safety, but this is also a critical role. This is not people being scared and hiding behind their phones. It's incredibly critical for people who are willing to bear witness to what is happening during a protest and to keep everyone accountable through the process of bearing witness. That might look like silent observation. That might look like sitting in a circle. That might look like standing to the side and just having your phone ready to record if there's an altercation. That can look like all sorts of things, but we need that presence as available. We also need artists. Art as a form of protest is a wonderful thing. And seeing where there's a space of violence, seeing people who come and bring their pencils or their paint or their music and create art in the face of violence is incredibly powerful. And it's something that is valid and is a wonderful form of protest. It's incredibly moving when you experience it. We also need demonstrators. Some of those photos that Brent showed is a great example. We need people who are willing to make a scene, to put themselves out there, that through dramatic effect of various types. That's a form of protest. It's a valid form of protest. It's a form of protest that a lot of Canadians are very uncomfortable with, quite frankly. And that's doesn't mean it's not valid. It just means that it's not something a lot of people are doing or feeling as comfortable with. And so demonstrators are people who are, maybe doing a creative drama in the streets. They might be using paint as a graphic to represent, the spilled blood of war. They might be chaining themselves to a fence. We've seen a lot of that kind of stuff in ecological movements, things like that. They're going to be physically using their bodies in a way that is designed to get noticed, but also designed to elicit a reaction. Again, we don't have to see ourselves in all of these types, but all of these types can exist in the same protest space and work together to create a coherent form of protest. And lastly, but very much not leastly, we need nearby helpers. Really good, organized, nonviolent resistance movements and protests have people who are not walking down the street, but are nearby, ready to jump into action. They're the people that have water or snacks if it's hot outside and people are going to be in a single place for a long time. They're people that are lawyers who are walking around and handing out their phone numbers in case people get, if things get violent or things get tricky and the police get involved, which doesn't always happen, but it's nice to happen. There are people who have chairs for people who have been on their feet all day and will bring them somewhere to sit, or a stool or something like that. There are also businesses like cafes or local spots that say, hey, we're a place of refuge. We're a spot that if things get crazy or you feel overwhelmed or something happens and you're a protester, this is a safe space to come to you. We will open our doors to you and give you a place to sit and to rest and to be safe. All of these in a time of a protest are important aspects and important roles that you can play. You might be thinking, I'm not anywhere near Ottawa. It's just not going to be possible for me to be there. What can I do? And we were talking as staff this morning. We were reading a book together as a staff team. And in the book, they were talking about prayer, which is a word not everyone feels very comfortable with. But if we think about it as intentional support or well-meaning support, and that when something is happening, having people who are dedicated and thinking and sending, however you want to phrase it, well-meaning thoughts, prayer, upholding you. As Quakers, we often say, holding you in the light at the exact time of the time someone else is taking action or you are taking action is a powerful act of solidarity. And so we invite those that are not going to be with us in Ottawa to be able to do this, to consider holding a monthly meeting, a meeting for worship, a vigil or something at your house at the same time as the times that we are going to be actively protesting in Ottawa, and hold us in the light. That is a tangible action that you can take, and it does mean something. It's not nothing. It's not, wishy-washy. It is a tangible thing, because what it does is it also tells the people who are on the ground there's a reassurance in knowing that people care and that people are paying attention in whatever way that they can. And so there's a few ways that you can engage with us. We have an email list of the people who signed up for this, and we will send out updates as we have updates. But right now, the ways that we're thinking about handling the protest in Ottawa is three things, three stages. On the night before the protest, on the 26th, we will be gathering for a shared meal. So anyone who's participating in the protest in whatever capacity they have chosen, whether that's in any of these 7 roles or in another way that you have dreamt up because you're creative and I know that you're all thinking about it, you're invited to come and share a meal, because community happens when we're working together and we know each other. We want people to be standing side by side and knowing who they're standing with and doing this with, and not just, strangers to each other. I think we're more powerful when we treat each other as neighbors and allies. On the morning of the 27th, there will be a protest that will be what we would call a more traditional form of protest, where we will invite all forms of protest, including all of the 7 that I've listed here, but any others, to come and protest as people are arriving at the arms fair. We will give out details as people sign up and say they're willing to attend. We're not going to give times and moments here, because we want to have time to make those logistics happen and then communicate them out to the people who say they're going to be there. And then in the afternoon, what we haven't done before, this will be a new thing, is timed with when the arms fair folks will be leaving for the day, is that we intend to hold a Quaker style silent worship out again at the site. And the idea is to create multiple ways for the people inside to see that we care. And sometimes in our protests, we can be fueled by outrage or frustration or anger, and taking time to sit in solidarity and actually maybe even hold in the light that people are inside as much as the people who are outside, and do what we do in loving our enemies as best as we can, to hold space for them in a powerful way in the afternoon, in a more traditional, what people would associate with a traditional Quaker form of worship, which is sitting in silence and solidarity. And so that is what we have planned for now. There may be more developing information on that, and we would love to have you join us. The way to do that is to reach out to Sandra, who is here. Sandra's going to put her email in the chat. And if you are planning to come to Ottawa and you live outside of Ottawa and you would like assistance with help with understanding logistics and locations and things like that, you can email Sandra. We also have all of your emails as you've registered for the Zoom, and we will be sending out updates to that mass email list. So if you're not physically going to be present, or you're not sure at this point, you'll still get information about how you can support and uphold. And a third way, some of you may be here because you're just thinking, what can I do? The world is falling apart around me in more and more ways that it feels, and I feel like force with force is not working. And so I'm going to also give a very quick plug for a book club series that we're going to be hosting in the next few months. For those of you that are interested in learning more about what nonviolence resistance looks like in an organized manner, and talking about the Canadian context for that. So I'm just going to throw the poster up on here, and we will also send this out. But for those that are interested in learning more besides this one active protest, but in the broader scheme of things, we will be doing some education on this topic, and we will be using a wonderful book by Erica Chenoweth called Civil Resistance, What Everyone Needs to Know. And you are all very much invited to attend this and to engage with this topic as we aim to increase our education, our peace education offerings, particularly in this area, alongside our friends at the Canadian Coalition for Nonviolence Defense. I am going to stop now, and Sandra's going to take over, and there's going to be a chance for some questions.
Yeah, I want to say thank you very much to Mel, Brent, and Kelsey for sharing with us tonight. And it was really, I think, enlightening. And it shows the context of where we're at, things that can be done, and then plans that we have. So there are many different ways that one can engage with the material you heard about tonight. I will make time for questions. I just want to also say that there is a bill in Parliament, the No Loopholes Act, that Kelsey talked about, that people are very free to contact their MPs about. I know CFSC has shared through our social media and so on, I think our website, that you can contact, there's letters and so on that you can contact and write your MPs so that they can vote yes for it, to be supportive of that amendment that was put forward by Jenny Kwan, because it will be coming to a vote soon, and the more MPs hear about it, the better chance it has of passing. So I think that's a really important thing that's happening really soon. So please do what you can if you can. I know there are some friends already who have written to their MPs about that, and I'm grateful when you CC me on those, so I know what's being done from the Quaker community. So if anybody has any questions, I guess now is the time. You can, if you put up your hand, we can go ahead, or you can write it in the chat. Yeah.